My son was a healthy, independent, and functional individual, highly productive, stood in front of presidents. But now, because THC has been in jail in front of the police several times, doesn't recognize us or himself.
I love my sons more than anything in the world. Proud of him, gentle soul, successful in what he'd done in college, and would have done anything to help him, whether he wanted to be around people or not, to get going on a career or anything else I could do to personally support him. And through no fault of his own, he had a condition of tinnitus, headed down the path of THC edibles to try to cope with that got out of control unbeknownst to him, had delusions, paranoia, and psychosis.
He was determined to get back to school. Joshua was determined to get back to college because it started in January, and he wanted to go back. And if I had known what I know now, I would have said absolutely not. We're going to make sure that you understand what you're doing to your body and what could potentially happen. I did not know. There was no education for me at the time.
It's almost 1 year ago that my son got diagnosed with CIH, cannabis-induced hyperemesis. After 3 visits to the ER with severe abdominal pain, we found out that it was caused by his vaping of the THC. He was admitted. The reason why he was admitted was because he had his organs were going into failure, kidneys, ruptured esophagus, air trapped in his chest.
We have been living this nightmare for 4 years. It has taken a toll on my family and also financially. I want people to be aware that it can happen to anyone. It can happen to your kid, to your grandkid, to your nephew, to your niece, to anyone, because it's everywhere. It's so easy for young people to have access to it.
And 2023 is when the horror, I guess you could say, really happened, because that's when he was in and out of psychiatric hospitals, in and out. It was like a revolving door. And by that time, he was getting all his product from the smoke shop.
It was just amazing how quickly that process of a little use and then a lot more use and gaining the wrong friends and then it causing grade problems, financial problems. Ultimately, he resorted to selling it too. And then the criminal offenses that he committed, he wasn't arrested for using or possessing. He was arrested for doing much more serious things under the influence. And I just find that so many people I tell the story to have no idea that marijuana is serious enough to lead to that. A lot of moms and even high school students that I talk to at the high school, I'll tell them some of the things that happened to my son, and they're in a little bit of disbelief. And I'll say, no, my husband's a doctor. I can tell you scientific things. And they say, wow, no one ever told me that.
There was this assumption in the media that marijuana legalization was a progressive cause. It was going to help disadvantaged communities, but nothing could be farther from the truth. These pot shops are not going into suburban neighborhoods; they're going into the inner cities. Okay, the primary users of marijuana products are not college students; they're high school students and high school dropouts. Okay, this is not going to lead to any sort of social justice. If you care about inequity in our society, you should be the most opposed to marijuana legalization because it's having the most impact on the most vulnerable citizens.
the vape stores, the retailers, the manufacturers of these products are making money off your kid being dependent on their products. They're making money on the fact that your kid is depressed, that your kid has anxiety, and your kid, when they get on the internet, thinks this is the solution. So they're making a ton of money off the mental health of all of our kids and our teens.
As a therapist, I've seen some heartbreaking stories. A couple that I worked with that went on a cannabis weekend instead of going camping, unfortunately went to a state where cannabis was legal. And he came back, but she didn't. She ended up being hospitalized long term, and her brain was forever changed by psychosis caused by cannabis. I've got a lot of adolescent clients that I see that started just experimenting with cannabis when they were 12, 13 years old, and by 14, 15 have a daily cannabis use issue and are having gastrointestinal problems and psychosis that is changing the trajectory of the rest of their lives. And I've seen especially people who are engaging in cannabis use that do it because they want to treat anxiety, because for them, it reduces anxiety. But what happens, unfortunately, in the long run is it increases anxiety, paranoia, and decreases the ability to actually learn and utilize healthy coping skills, ending up being couch locked and isolated using cannabis on a daily basis really is having a negative effect on their long-term life satisfaction.
THC affects the individual, but not just the individual. It affects the whole family. My husband and I were empty nesters. Now we have a person that we need to care for day and night.
Instead of taking a small, nice trip somewhere, you're putting money together for rehab. And it's not only that. It's the time that you put into it. Driving them to rehab, bringing them from rehab, taking them to the hospital, staying up with him at the hospital. He's been to the ER 30 to 40 times. And, we do have hope that he's going to get better. He's going to come out of it. But sometimes you just want the day to end. That's all. That's it.
THC addiction wrapped itself around a very innocent, happy, well-adjusted, successful daughter, my daughter. And the drug made and created a mental health problem for her that she is still struggling to this day to get out of. THC drove her into depression further and kept her in the cycle of depression and anxiety. And she could not break it because of the harmful, addictive qualities of the chemicals and the THC itself.
THC is addictive. It has caused them so much loss. Time, money, relationships. And it's currently still affecting him where he doesn't have the quality of life that he used to have. He lost everything, including his capacity to reason.
as a mom, as a family member who has experienced a loved one going through cannabis-induced psychosis, I want to challenge you to reach out to medical professionals, to reach out to psychiatrists, to reach out to school individuals who are in the schools to really learn the impacts and the effects of vape marijuana and cannabis-induced psychosis. You'll be amazed at the stories that you hear. The cannabis industry, they are choosing profits over people, and I want you to be aware.
Lawmakers need to understand that marijuana legalization is a failed experiment because it leads to commercialization and normalization of a product, which leads to increased use of that product. And increased use of that product creates not just a costly regulatory regime to try to rein it in, but also leads to enormous downstream costs to try to mitigate the harms of the increased use of this product, to where the budget will never balance.
Money should not replace our brains. Texans' brains, Americans' brains are worth infinitely more than any amount of money that you could get by taxing and selling these products. It's plain and simple.
THC addiction prevents young teenagers who are already struggling with just being a teenager and gives them permanent disabilities and adjusting as a happy, productive, loving person, because that's what the drug does.
Legalization is a bad idea from a public health standpoint, from a mental health standpoint, from a physical health standpoint, and it's a bad idea from a fiscal standpoint to the state's budgets because of all the money that's going to end up being spent in a attempt to mitigate the downstream damage of increased use.